Denmark, we have a well-established tradition of solidarity manifestations with the youth and the peoples of other countries when they are under severe attacks or rise and mobilize and struggle for change. And when they protest, they are often confronted with police or military forces. We don't participate in or organize solidarity work in a false belief that we should be the saviors of the rest of the world. We support the youth and the peoples in their own struggles as the only possible way. When we work as internationalists, it's because we as young, progressive and revolutionary people in the Danish national theatre are facing many of the same struggles and problems as the rest of the world's next generation. We also face capitalism in all its manifestations, in its hunger for profit and in all of its reactionary expressions in our country.
When I was born, my mother could stay at the hospital with me for a couple of days. Afterwards, she would enjoy some kind of support from the state and have some housing and childcare guaranteed. And she would not be met with suspicion or be put down to the same extent as today. When I shall have a baby, we will be kicked out of the hospital immediately. We will have to survive in a system and a country where everyone is supposed to be the creator of his or her own happiness, while the banks get billions of euros from the taxpayers' money.
Our generation was born in the same period where the so-called Scandinavian welfare model was cut back and seriously amputated, and slowly but surely has been replaced by the neoliberal economic model.
Det på vej, for længe har vi kuet, for det er fuld af løgn, det har vi gennemskuet. Hvor land ren elendighed, og det gør vi nu noget.
We have seen cutback followed by cutback. During the crisis of the economic system, we have only seen one type of solution carried out in practice. That is the dictate of the European Union. Privatizations, reactionary so-called reforms and slaughter of the public sector. The welfare state has been changed into the competition state. In 2013, the government, headed by Social Democrats, locked out all the Danish school teachers and closed the schools for weeks in order to impose a public school reform, prolonging the school hours and lowering the wage and working conditions of the teachers. It was accompanied by the largest public protest for decades. Shortly afterwards, the same government sold big slices of the national energy supply to the infamous Goldman Sachs. That forced the Left Reformist Party to leave the government. But the Prime Minister, Helle Thorning-Schmidt, strengthened her bid as the next president of the European Union.
Men lad os give statsminister en chance. Velkommen til Helle Thorning-Schmidt.
The former Danish Prime Minister Anders Fogh Rasmussen was rewarded for his war crimes with the post as a General Secretary of NATO.
Statsminister Anders Fogh Rasmussen.
In relatively few years, Denmark has changed its international role from a declared peacekeeper to do service in the front lines of the imperialist war wars of aggression. The so-called War on Terror, launched by the US, has been supported by all Danish governments. But there has also been great popular mobilizations against the wars in Afghanistan and especially Iraq. In 2011, all parties in the Danish parliament voted in favor of the bombings and war against Libya. The government has even favored bombing and a war against Syria. They planned the biggest arms trade ever to be concluded in 2015, when they will buy new fighter jets for the huge sum of around 4 billion euros. The Danish war participation has been extremely costly and have only benefited a handful of monopolies with the Maersk Group at the top.
When I was born, I was supposed to take education supported by the state and money that my parents and grandparents had paid taxes to their entire life. Today the student grants are quite low and it's almost impossible to sustain yourself unless you have some kind of rich parents which can pay for the rest of your needs. I must take loans and have debts to have an education so I can get a job and pay back the loans. Even though the majority of the taxes have been paid by workers and ordinary people, the capitalists think that the money and taxes belong to themselves.
No blood for oil has been one of our slogans. Since Denmark joined the Afghanistan war in 2001, anti-war activists have been protesting every day in front of the parliament, the Danish Peace Watch. They've also been supported and joined by ex-soldiers from Iraq and Afghanistan, condemning the criminal wars and NATO. In an interview by KPnetTV, two of these soldiers told their stories and among other things stated the following.
Vi sidder foran Christiansborg Slotsplads, hvor I holder til sådan hver hverdag fra 1 til 3. Hvorfor gør I det?
Ja, det er jo fordi, der er en masse ting, der er forkert eller galt i det her land her. Personligt begyndte det for mit vedkommende, da jeg fandt ud af, at NATO basalt set er en terrororganisation. Stort set alle de krige NATO har deltaget i, så længe jeg kan huske i hvert fald. De har ikke rent mel i posen. Det har været baseret på magt og profit, og har ikke rigtig haft noget med frihed, demokrati eller det danske folk at gøre. Så jeg vågnede op og fandt ud af, at vi er blevet pænt groft misbrugt. Synes jeg så, at på tide, at det kommer ud. Folk får det at vide.
Er det noget i samme stil, du tænker, Brian?
Præcis det samme. Altså, de har taget røven på os, for at sige det på godt dansk, jo. Manipulerer med befolkningen, og ikke mindst også. Jeg var så dum dengang at tage afsted 2 gange. Det, der i sandheden er sket dernede i Afghanistan, det er, at vi har været nede og afskærme, så der er blevet bygget pipelines for det Kaspiske Hav. Der er blevet stjålet opium og nogle mineraler. Jeg ved ikke så meget om det med mineralerne, men jeg ved, at opiumsproduktionen den steg med over 3.300% siden vi er gået ind i NATO. Og det er officielt tal. Afghanerne har ikke fået nogen penge.
Like other countries, not least in the European Union, we have seen attacks on popular alternative places for the youth, like the Youth House in Copenhagen and Christiania. In 2007, the Youth House was attacked and closed down by elite troopers and later torn down. In spite of tear gas, mass arrest and brutal repression, the protests continued week after week until the politicians had to concede and a new House of the Youth was established, run by the youth itself. Such liberated areas have been central places for the progressive movements and youth actions. During these struggles we have experienced a great international solidarity. Capitalism rules by creating divisions among the peoples. War, racism and xenophobia are part and parcel of the system. The spread of racism to prevent the worker and the people from uniting against their common enemies is a favorite weapon of the bourgeois and the right wing. Also in Denmark, right-wing extremism has been on the rise. Since the occupation of Denmark by the Nazis, there has been a strong anti-fascist movement that still is fighting, also when the new Nazis try to manifest themselves in the big cities and organize attacks on leftists, revolutionaries and demonstrations. We say, no Nazis in our streets, and fight to throw them out. The racist Danish National Party was number 1 in votes at the election for the European Parliament in May this year. The propaganda in the bourgeois media against foreigners has been deafening for years on end, especially against Muslims. Even when it comes to refugees escaping war and terror, capitalism has given up the banner of humanism. The refugees themselves are portrayed as the originators of the wars and their own sufferings. At the elections for the European Parliament, we have worked with the People's Movement Against the European Union, Progressive Front of different political forces, anti-racist, against neoliberalism and in favor of democracy and sovereign nations. Its goal is to get Denmark out of the European Union. It has 8.1% of the votes and 1 member of the European Parliament. We will continue to fight the neoliberal policy and reactionary reforms of the European Union. This autumn there will be a high school reform, so we prepare for struggle. The Social Democratic government is continuing its attack on the youth and the people. We will stand up against any imperialist aggression and hold the high banner for national independence in Denmark as well as anywhere else. We will fight to counter the Zionist aggression in Palestine. We shall let us be inspired from you and your struggles, comrades from all over the world, and we will strive to fulfill our part in the global movement against fascism and imperialism.